Joe Stephen Graves, City Planner for Cahoon, representing Mayor Gillick.
Tom Warner, representing Saratoga County. Patrick Jordan, Port of Albany.
Sandy Misowitz, Executive Director of CDTC.
Patrick Barnes, Region 1, New York State DOT.
Kathy Sheehan, City of Albany.
Carl Brazil, CDTA. Greg Wixer, Region 1 DOT.
Bob Rice, New York DOT.
Okay, great. And we'll just quickly, for purposes of attendance, run through who's listening virtually. We have Jen Sapanis from CDTC, Ron Epstein from the New York State DOT, Andrew Krushek from Troy, O'Brien from Albany County. I apologize for that. Carrie Ward from CDTC staff, Charles Patricelli, I apologize, from City of Watervliet, Chris Bauer from CDTC, Craig Warner representing CDRPC, Mark Castiglione, Executive Director of CDRPC, Randy Milano from the City of Albany, Rima Shamia from CDTC staff, Steve Iacetta from the Albany Airport Authority, Supervisor Phil Bear from the Town of Clifton Park, Teresa LaSalle from CDTC staff, and Tom Gifford. Did I miss anybody? Okay, take it away.
Great. Do we have anyone who has signed up to speak?
No, not at this time.
Okay, great. So let's start with the minutes of our meeting of September 3rd, 2021. You all received them in advance. So I'd like to entertain a motion to adopt those minutes.
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Any discussion, changes, corrections? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great, the minutes have passed. And so now we're going to turn to the presentation on our, something that we are all eagerly anticipating, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. I'll take it over to you, Cindy.
Great, thanks, Mayor. I'm sure we're all very interested in learning more about the recently enacted infrastructure bill. As of a day and a half ago, I believe it's officially being termed the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, BIL. So that's likely how we'll be referring to it going forward. We've invited Ron Epstein from the New York State Department of Transportation to provide us a presentation today, just sort of giving us an overview of the new law and some of the initial thinking on how it might impact New York State. So with that, I will turn it over to Ron Epstein. And Ron, you can share your screen, I believe.
It says it's disabled. Oh, can you, there we go. Sorry, you have to see that. Here we go. See if that works. Are you seeing a presentation at this point?
No, we're not seeing it here.
Okay, I'll give it one more try. Sorry, technology is wonderful. Let's see here. Share screen. It says host is disabled.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay.
I made you a I have made you a co-host, Ron, so you should be able
Thank
to
you.
now.
Let's see.
Here we go.
You got it.
Got it? Okay, great. So let me just do this. Can you see that? Okay, great. It sounds like we're in business here. Anyway, good afternoon, everybody. Actually, I didn't realize this was in person. I feel kind of foolish because I'm literally 50 yards away. I could have just hopped over, but I hope you're all doing well. So yes, we are in a position where after a number of years, we have a new fully funded, guaranteed surface transportation reauthorization bill. That bill is part of a larger infrastructure bill, which includes broadband, clean water, wastewater, and additional funding for aviation and rail. I think what this body is very engaged with is the reauthorization of the FAST Act. And the reauthorization bill provides roughly $568 billion over a 5-year period. This will come in basically 3 tranches of funding. First, there's the Highway Trust Fund. Can you guys hear me okay? I'm sorry, I'm getting a lot of feedback.
You're fine on our end.
Oh, thank you. There's the Highway Trust Fund, which The appropriations, the authorizations require no additional action over the next 5 years. There's additional advanced guaranteed appropriations, which is a series of pay-fors, as well as additional general fund transfers into the Highway Trust Fund. Those require no additional action over the 5 years. And then there's general fund authorizations, enhancement on top of the guaranteed amounts that will require additional appropriation. There's also embedded in the bill $100 billion in discretionary opportunities, whether it be the transit program for replacement of rail cars or station accessibility. There's new grant programs there. There's a significant amount of new discretionary funding for intercity and freight rail. And then there's a bridge program that's new, and we can talk about those in a little bit. Just a couple of things up front. I mentioned it is a fully funded 5-year bill. It does not address the Highway Trust Fund. So in 5 years, we'll be having the same conversation about how do we figure out what revenues are available and what other financial mechanisms can be used to at least support the baseline revenues established in this bill. Obviously, we don't want to go backwards. In terms of the Highway Trust Fund itself, it does retain the provision of 90% of the formula funds, 90% of the funds going out to states on formula, which is good. It also emphasizes resilience, carbon reduction, and also structures such as bridges and culverts. It provides enhanced flexibility for environmental reviews. It codifies one federal decision into statute, and it makes the 4F process a little bit easier to navigate in terms of timing and decisions on the part of the Federal Highway Administration. It also does include construction materials under Buy America. It's something we'll have to wait and see guidance on how that will impact not only the projects, but the cost of the projects. But it does, exclude certain aggregates, bonding agents, and cement type materials. I won't spend much time on this, but this just shows you how we get to the $567 billion in terms of, the Highway Trust Fund itself. The highway program is $351 billion. There wasn't enough money to get to $351 billion. So they needed those additional guaranteed appropriations to get to those levels. So the two numbers at the bottom basically is how you get to the $568 billion. In terms of New York State, we worked very closely with our delegation over the last several years on reauthorization. We had a jump start since we had a 1-year extension of the bill, but guaranteed funding was very important to us. Funding to address our bridges and culverts, which, we're in the Northeast. We have older infrastructure. It's subject to a lot more utilization, harsher weather. And so there is a restoration. There used to be a bridge program going back over a decade. This provides new formula funding specifically directed for bridges and culverts. I mentioned that the bill enhances eligibility pretty much in every program for resilience as well as greenhouse gas emissions. For highway safety, we used to be allowed to use a portion of the program for non-engineering activities, things that would enhance the safety of pedestrians through education, awareness, and potentially enforcement. That has been restored in this act, so we can use up to 10% of that program for those non-engineering activities. In the event that we have a catastrophic incident, unfortunately in New York, we've had too many extreme weather events that have resulted in damage requiring temporary or permanent repairs to roadways and structures. This extends the period of availability of 100% federal funding to rectify that situation from 180 days to 270 days. It's something that we've worked hard to get in because sometimes, given the extent of the flooding or the damage, you can't actually do the repairs immediately. And so having that additional time at 100% federal share is very important. In terms of grade crossing safety, one of the things that was sort of a barrier towards closing crossings, especially privately owned crossings, is that the incentive payment was limited to $7,500. We can now use up to $100,000 for closing crossings. And then the highway title includes an extraordinary amount of new eligibility for public transportation and freight rail. So when it comes down to it, everybody wants to know about the money. So really, here's what happens on the highway side. You get $4.6 billion in additional federal funding. On the transit side, it's about $2.8 billion in new additional funding. That doesn't mean, however, that New York is going to get 13.5 billion in new money. While it is new money in terms of, we didn't have it before, New York State, like a lot of the municipalities sitting around this table, have multi-year plans. They have, county finance plan, we have a state finance plan where we have projected out a certain level of spending in federal categories over so many years. And so, really the delta here is that 4.6 billion on the highway side, and that's over a 5-year period. So it's not like all of a sudden above and beyond what the state was expecting, we got 13 and a half. It really comes down to above and beyond what the baseline was, which is really carrying the last year of the FAST Act and that the extension year 2021 out. That's what that $4.6 billion is based on. I won't go over this chart, but I'll make it available. This just shows you where the buckets of money come in. And also this shows you the same thing in terms of dollars and percentage. This is the chart I really wanted to talk about on the highway side, and I have a similar one for public transportation. This kind of breaks down the $4.6 billion that we are anticipated to receive over the next 5-year period. It really comes in the form of 2 programs. The first program is the big 41% block there that's kind of grayish, at least on my screen, is the new bridge program. So a lot of the new funding, $1.9 billion, is coming in through that new bridge program. The next category that we get a significant increase in over the prior bill is the National Highway Performance Program. And I know we've had conversations around this table before about NHPP because it is restrictive in terms of the type of facilities the funds can be used for. It represents 1/3 of the state and local system, and that pretty much mirrors nationally when you look at other states as well. So it's really for those high volume national highway system roadways. One of the features in this bill was, as part of resiliency and mitigating impacts of climate, is 15% of that program can now be used anywhere on the federal aid eligible system for protective measures, protective features to mitigate the risks of future damages. So that is something that is new and that I'm sure you'll have conversations about in the future when you're talking about allocation of funds. So this kind of just goes through very quickly the categorical programs. I just mentioned the 15% set aside for any eligible facility for National Highway Performance Program. The Service Transportation Program, which is the most flexible program that we have. A lot of you have participated in delivering projects that are sourced through there. There wasn't a lot of policy change in there. They did retain the amount that's suballocated to areas based on population, but it includes, as you will see consistently in here, eligibility for electric vehicles, construction of wildlife crossings to protect both motorists and pedestrians, so that we can eliminate those collisions. And it also, for those of you that have what we call off-system bridges, the set aside off the top of that program is increased from 15 to 20%. A number of the municipalities in this region also participate in the Transportation Alternatives Program, a competitive program. It also basically removes the cap on the dollars that are available for TAP that are funded off of STP. And so now it's a strict 10% set aside. So I'll talk about TAP in a few minutes, but in terms of the CMAQ program, again, CMAQ is only eligible in certain areas based on maintenance and non-conformance areas, but it does include eligibility to include, again, electrification, replacement of older, dirty diesel engines, and eligibility for bike shares, scooter shares, carpooling programs. And for public transportation in areas of less than $200,000 population, it removes the restriction that those funds are not timed out in terms of operating assistance eligibility. So as long as you can demonstrate that the transit service for a small urbanized area is continuing to provide that air quality benefit, then there will be no cap on its use. I mentioned the bridge formula program. Obviously that will be a discussion of how to suballocate those funds amongst the eligible structures. How they got to that program is they basically came up with a measure that said, okay, what is the cost to replace poor bridges and what is the cost to rehabilitate poor bridges? And then they applied the factors to every state in the nation and the territories. And, that's where our apportionment is based on. They created several new programs. One of them is a carbon reduction program, very similar to CMAC. And some will say, well, why isn't this just, an enhancement to CMAC? CMAC is a greater share for New York than other programs, and the same thing for some other states. So what they did is they based this program based on our overall share of the federal program, as opposed to if they put it into CMAC, certain states like New York probably would have gotten I'm using air quotes, a disproportionate share. So we have a new program. It's a formula program, and there is a competitive companion to it. Again, it lets us do a lot of things that help reduce, idling, help reduce fuel usage, enhance, other alternatives that support non-motorized or reduce discretionary trips. I mentioned public transportation is also embedded within the highway title, and this also allows for additional eligibility under the highway programs for construction of BRT corridors, signal prioritization, redesign of intersections as appropriate for implementing those projects, coordinating fare collection between operations. So there's a lot of enhanced activity there for transit. There's a Protect program. That Protect program is really meant to harden assets that are vulnerable. And so basically this will focus the resources on, storm surge, reducing the impacts of flooding. And also there's a heavy emphasis on restoration of ecosystems, especially as it relates to, aquatic species, providing safe passage, replacing culverts so that, especially species that are susceptible to climate and impacts of, poor water hydrodynamic flow, those activities can help mitigate those impacts. There is an electric vehicle charging program. It's about $175 million. It's delivered through a new formula, and it is strategically, intended to ensure that as we transition to alternative fuels, whether it be hydrogen, electric, propane, that there are refueling systems in place along the corridors that people will need to travel. What it doesn't do, and they did not do in this bill yet, is remove the restriction on the non-grandfathered interstates for allowing these to be at rest areas. So the thruway's grandfathered in, they're good to go, but like the Northway, we're still not allowed to put electric vehicle charging stations along the Northway as long as the individual is paying for the cost of that electricity. We can give it away for free, but that's not a sustainable business model necessarily. I did mention TAP. The amount of the program that will go out to based on population increases from about 50 to 59%. So more money there for local entities. It also codifies essentially safe routes to school in statute as an activity. And also it requires us to give priority to disadvantaged communities. And that's another theme you'll see throughout the bill is a lot of attention and resources will be directed to communities that may not have benefited as greatly as others in the past. I mentioned the Highway Safety Improvement Program. That's where we can now, utilize non-engineering activities through the program. National Freight Program, they really didn't make any major changes. We're still moving forward with the annual funding and selection of projects. That's a competitive process, but they did actually increase the amount we could use for multimodal projects. So, whether it be ports, inland ports, whatever, now can be, used up to 30% of the total amount annually, as opposed to previously it was 10. So that will help with the integration of the network, especially as we transition to a more efficient and more energy sustainable model for delivering goods and materials. I mentioned the highway grade crossing and the emergency release. I'll skip over that really quickly. I'm not going to go into any detail on the next several slides, but I mentioned there's $100 billion in new discretionary funds that are available over the next 5 years. Those will be administered by USDOT, and I'll make these slides available. These just kind of lay out the programs that are eligible. Again, intermodal, resiliency, mitigating community impacts, a number of programs, that are here and available under the new bill. One that I will point out is there is a culvert program, specifically a discretionary program, $1 billion a year. And again, this is another one that is focusing on not only ensuring that we mitigate the impacts of climate and extreme weather events by right sizing and basically appropriately modernizing our culverts, but also ensuring that there's a safe passage for fish. Let's see on here. I think the other one I'll point out is the Reconnecting Communities pilots. This will provide funds. A lot of the money appears, at least at the surface, to be going towards planning studies for communities to develop proposals to address infrastructure that currently, creates a barrier to community involvement and connectivity. It will provide some funding for construction, but given the limitation on the dollar amount, it's basically, $1 billion over 5 years. I think the expectation is those other discretionary programs will fund the construction, and that this is to develop the capacity, especially locally and in certain communities, to help figure out what it is they would like to see in terms of, reconnecting and removing barriers. I'll skip over these here. In the interest of time, I did want to talk briefly about public transportation. The bill does provide a significant increase in funding for public transportation. Again, I'll make this table available. But basically, New York gets its funding for public transportation primarily through two major programs. One is the Urbanized Area Formula Program. It's apportioned directly to the urbanized area by FTA. And the other is the State of Good Repair Program, also apportioned directly by FTA. And the State of Good Repair Program basically goes to three major areas. One is Poughkeepsie, one is the New York metropolitan area, and the other is Buffalo. Primarily, I say, because it's rail, but there are some motor bus provisions within that. So other areas do get some funding, but that's where the primary funding breaks out. A significant portion of the transit growth is going to the Urbanized Area Formula Program, and that's the meat and potatoes of like a CDTA in the capital region or a Centro in the central New York region. So that's good news. It will provide more resources to try and catch up. I don't know that it will help achieve a state of good repair because there are needs, but at least it will help mitigate the gap between where we are today and a state of good repair. I did want to talk very briefly about rail because there are a number of rail assets in this region, including the Livingston Avenue Bridge, that are potentially eligible for replacement. I always like to pick on that bridge because I like saying it's a Civil War era bridge, which it is. It's that old, and at some point, if that is not addressed and there is a failure, the detour is 2.5 hours, and it will bypass, the capital region. So that's something that is on the radar. We're working on an EA for that project, but there is grant funding here that could hopefully, provide the resources for Amtrak, who is acting on this behalf of the owner, CSX, to ultimately replace that bridge. And then in terms of airports, I'm getting a little out of syncs here, but the other thing I want to mention on rail, I apologize, is that in addition to the formula program, there's a $3 billion new competitive program that will also help eliminate and address grade crossings. And there's a specific attention provided to mitigating the impacts of trespass and other distracted fatalities as it relates to freight and commuter railroad and intercity passenger railroad crossings. So that's a program we're going to be looking at very closely to see what can be done to minimize those hazards. In terms of airports, there's a significant amount of money included in the bill for airport modernization, as well as modernization of FAA facilities and equipment. Specifically, there's $15 billion in additional airport improvement program that's apportioned. And so that will go to airports like Albany International. We'll see a significant amount of funding. When I take out New York will get about $1 billion in funding under that program. When I take out the Port Authority airports, it's about $200 million in new funding for the airports other than the Port Authority airports in New York. I'll close with this. I just want to talk about risks. Congress has a number of things that they need to address before the end of this fiscal year. One of them is they need a budget. They have not passed a full year budget. If they do not pass a full year budget, there is a prospect that they would need to do a continuing resolution through the end of the year. That would mean essentially, unless there's an anomaly in that legislation, that the 2021 levels would continue and we wouldn't realize the benefit of 2022 until probably the next fiscal year. We're hoping that since these funds are guaranteed and there's no benefit of not including them in a continuing resolution, if that is where we end up, that there will be an anomaly and they will be included as a separate line. The reason why I bring up the issue of continuing resolution is because they have a debt ceiling, they've got some other issues they need to address, all of which will potentially result in some sort of stalemate, hopefully not a shutdown, but some sort of disruption in the legislative calendar, which could push things like the budget further down the path. I mentioned that, listen, let's take the money where we get the money. I don't care where it comes from, but at some point, the bill will come due and we'll have to figure out after the 5th year of this bill, how do we pay for commitments going forward in year 6 through 10 and thereafter. I worry about the number of new competitive programs and, again, USDOT is going to be under a lot of pressure to figure out how to get these on the street quickly. For some of these new programs, they're going to have to figure out what the guidance is and how to receive the appropriate level of comment before they actually issue a NOFA. So that could take some time. So, I would hope not, but we could go a year without maybe seeing some of the programs be put out for competitive solicitation. One of the issues I know everybody around this table is experiencing is inflation. And then, related to, but separate from, inflation is just the availability of materials. There are some things because of the, shipping crisis that we just can't get. And when we can get them, they're exorbitant in terms of the price that we may have to pay. So how much does that eat into any of the new money that ends up being made available? There's also labor. It doesn't matter whether you're a DOT, whether you're a local Department of Public Works, or whether you're a contractor or consultant. Everybody is struggling with hiring and retention. And that is also going to drive up the price of, projects. I threw this in here because I want to make sure everyone understands that I'm sensitive, but there's a lot of infrastructure money coming, including, broadband, water, transportation. I recognize that you all currently still have the 2% property tax cap to deal with. It is something that we are actively talking about. What are the impacts and whether or not there's a means to exempt the infrastructure dollars from that calculation, so that you're not forced with making a decision or, a difficult decision on whether you're going to do this bridge or you're going to, fund this educational activity over here or this position in the fire department. So we're hoping that, we'll be able to work through some of those issues at the state level. And then there's expectations. And this just kind of circles back to where I was when I started. $4 billion over 5 years, $4.6 billion over 5 years. Sounds like a lot of money. It's really not. When you think about it, we could do one bridge in, downstate New York, and it would probably cost $4 billion to replace. So the question will become, and, what types of projects get done? What size, scale are they? How do they address our needs to, harden our system, to enhance our economic competitiveness? So, I think we need to also manage expectations in that, everybody's asked for $1 billion project here and $1 billion project there. And, I probably have about $40 billion worth of requests. We're not going to be able to get to everything. And I think that's always been the case. But I think there's just been such a buildup about, New York's going to get $13.5 billion. Well, that's true. But the delta above and beyond what we're already planning for is not anywhere near that. So I'll open it up for any concerns or comments. Apologize for taking so long. At some point, if you want, I can get into much more detail about the programs. I would say on the transit side, there's very little new policy. because of the way the bill was crafted. It wasn't done in a traditional, going through the committee process. The Environmental Public Works Committee, the Senate did do a bill, Commerce did a bill, banking didn't do a bill. So we never really got to the point where they did a lot of policy. So it kind of got slapped on at the end. But the highway side does have a lot of new policies and does have a lot of new discretionary programs. So there will be a lot more activity relating to getting acclimated to how to do certain things as opposed to where we would be on the transit side. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ron. I do see we have a question from Tom Gifford. Go ahead, Tom.
Hey, you apologize for taking so long, but I'm out of breath just listening to you.
Sorry.
I'm curious. We have the Village of Scotia, which I represent, has a bridge that CDTC is very familiar with. We only have one bridge in the village, and it goes over the railroad. I understand that the understructure of the bridge, the superstructure, I guess, or whatever, the underpart is owned by the railroad. They are unwilling to do anything with it and always have. So the village is strapped with that. I'm wondering if since some of this money, you glanced over it, but some of the money goes to the railroad, is there any way of holding their feet to the fire to use that money for something they're responsible for?
So the way I'll address that is that the railroad money primarily is competitive. So I believe that you will have an opportunity, as well as the railroad, we can actually facilitate these conversations to apply for the funds to, whether it be a replacement or rehabilitation of that particular structure. But it will be, the rail money is not a formula-based program. Those are all discretionary dollars.
Okay, thank you.
Any questions here in the room? And any other questions virtually?
We're gonna get the slides, correct?
Yes, Ron, you'll be able to share the slide deck with us?
Yes, and again, it's still draft because again, the bill is only so old. Even though we've been working with this since June for the most part, there are still things that we're learning on a daily basis. So just, again, recognizing its draft, we'll make it available. And like I said, we will be glad to discuss the implications further down the road. Really how the money will ultimately get spent is going to be your decision around that table. And, we'll help facilitate those conversations.
Great. If there's no other questions, thank you very much. We appreciate the detailed overview, and we'll certainly be having more conversations in the near future. Thanks, Ron.
Thanks. And my apologies. Like I said, I would have come over had I known it was in person. So I'll blame Pat for that. Right, Pat?
So don't worry about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Be well, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
So with that, we'll move on to tip amendments. We do have and I'll need a motion on approving a tip amendment. I'm going to hand it over to you, Sandy.
Sure. And actually, I'm going to hand it to my friends here at the Department of Transportation to review the tip amendment. I'm going to put the document up on my screen. Just give me a second to share it. And here we go.
All right. Yeah, this is a tip amendment to advance a bridge replacement of 146 over the Normanskill in Guilderland. This is part of a slew of various projects selected by main office to get after some backlog of infrastructure such as this. So it is not funded out of the core program, but comes with extra money. So about $5.3 million, and as much as we're going to obligate the funds in 22, it's really going to see construction in 2023. That's the current schedule. So that's the plan. Any questions for us on this?
Anyone have any questions? Okay, I see none.
Can I have a motion to adopt the amendment?
Make the motion with that. I'll
Second. Thank you, Tom. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay.
Thank you.
So now we are moving on to the tip solicitation update.
Yes, as you all are aware, we are currently, and the deadline is actually tomorrow, soliciting for new transportation improvement program projects to support a new program in 2022 through 2027. I just wanted to review with you, as you heard Ron describe in the presentation, the impact of the funding is still sort of being worked out. So CDTC as an NPO, we have not yet received TIP program instructions, which usually guide how we approach the construction of the transportation improvement program. We anticipate and are kind of selfishly hoping that we'll have that by the end of the calendar year. It might happen in January. The later it goes, though, into next year, the more it's going to squeeze our schedule. So where we're at right now, I put it up on the screen here. We're at December 3rd, basically. The submission deadline is tomorrow. We're going to start evaluating them here at staff level. This is the old, here it is. Sorry about that. On January 12th will be our next planning committee meeting, at which point we're going to hopefully work out the existing commitments to existing projects, and if there's any additional funding or changes to scope and schedule and costs that need to be addressed on existing projects. We'll work out hopefully the status of our set-asides, and we will also work out a few other aspects of the existing program, with hopefully being able to share with you a candidate list on that January 12th meeting, and then the next meeting on January 19th, which is an additional meeting. As you can see, we already pushed out the first planning committee for meeting for 2022, I'm sorry, into push it out 1 week. The January 19th meeting, though, I think is when we're really going to hopefully be able to get into project programming. This all depends, of course, on the program instructions and when they come to us. So we have an understanding of the budget target that we're going to be programming to. If all goes according to plan, we'll work through the process in the months of January and February and come back to this body in the month of March at the March Policy Board meeting with a draft for you folks to take an action to issue it for public review. We have a 60-day public review period. We'll make any adjustments based on public comment, hopefully at the May Planning Committee meeting, and then come back to you in June for adoption of a TIP. So that is the high-level schedule. In terms of where we're at with the solicitation itself, as of we have, I'll share my screen again. We had about 71 applications. Sorry, I'm just gonna pull up the table real quick here. At noon today, we had 60 applications from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, about 12 sponsors. Since noon, we've gotten a few more, so things are starting to pick up. We're up to 71 as of just prior to this meeting. We usually, a typical solicitation results in anywhere from 100 to 110-ish project proposals, so we do expect a few more. But as you can see, we've got quite a chunk from the New York State Department of Transportation already. I don't know if there's more coming, if you have any thoughts on that.
Well, if you're looking for 100 and only 71, we can shoot some out.
You have more, right?
Yeah, but in all seriousness, what's the usual breakdown? I mean, it's percentage based, that if that's usual, so be it. Like,
Yeah,
unusual.
that's not an untypical number. Yeah. So, we are, again, going to be communicating with you beginning Monday morning to make sure, number one, we've received everything. I understand there's been some technical challenges with the application. I think we have worked out a solution with everybody, but we absolutely want to make certain that we've got all of the applications accounted for. So expect an email from us first thing on Monday morning to to your elected official as well as to the contact listed on the application so that we ensure we have everything. And let us know immediately if you see a project that you propose that's not on that list, so that we can fix what was more than likely a technical issue. Does anybody have any questions or comments about that?
Not directly about that, but any update on the TAP CMAQ application timeframes?
No, unless our DOT partners have any news. Last I've heard, there has not been any movement on that.
I mean, we're finishing up staff reviews right now for submission to main office, rolling them up statewide. You know, so we're still probably weeks away, if not a month or two away from those sort of announcements. Anybody that would talk to relative to the submission of a TIP applicant, that they should continue down that route, whether it was Bridge New York North or a TAP CMAQ project. Folks are sort of getting used to doing multiple submissions for the various programs.
And this is my first round, so forgive me if this is just commonplace, but is it anticipated that decisions on that program will be made before June?
On TAP CMAQ, it kind of has historically folded into the budget process for New York State, and it sort of depends on how they want to announce them.
Okay.
In some years, we have gotten it.
We ran into the same scenario the last TIP update, that some candidates, I think we found out the solicitation as candidates were being selected from the core funding and someone withdrawn. We partially funded one in Saratoga, I think, that was also a candidate. So it's not uncommon to have this sort of overlap of, you have competitive solicitations out there at the same time, the same projects are competing for some of the core program. So nothing you're seeing is atypical. In terms of a comment, I think it's important that, you know, Ron did mention, you know, that there are policy changes with this federal bill. And so all you have right now is the authorizing legislation. He mentioned where you get into December, whether it's a continuing resolution or the appropriation acts, which are really the money that are behind these things. Those sort of things still need to occur. So, you know, as Sandy is talking, everybody's submitting candidates here, but the money and we're sort of on a parallel track. We've got a whole slew of candidates, but we're not still quite sure of what the color of particular money is going to be in the prescription that it's sort of going to be. So I think collectively, whether it's at DOT or the staff here, trying to keep these all going so we could still get ultimately the approval and everything in place prior to the next federal fiscal 22 or 23, that would be actually when this will all be set to go. So there are lots of things in motion. It's not atypical for program update cycle though.
Thank you.
Sandy, will there be an updated list of the candidates, projects at close of business tomorrow that we can?
We'll probably have it for you Monday morning because, as I said, I'm a little concerned about some of the technology issues, and also we set the deadline for 5 p.m. So we'll need a minute to make sure we've got it all compiled. But Monday morning, expect to see an email from us.
Updated table.
Yep. Yeah, we'll certainly have a candidate list and project names and.
Thank you.
But again, the goal is really to make sure that, especially for sponsors who submitted multiple proposals, that we have them all. Any other questions? Anyone virtually have any questions? Okay, seeing none, we can move on to the next item.
Great, and that's also kicking over to you.
Back to me. So we did, I just wanted to touch upon our recent, what we used to call the progress report is now being referred to, we've kind of folded it into what's called the performance and expenditure report. It's still going to be a 6-month report that we're required to provide to our federal partners and our state partners, documenting the progress we've made on our planning activities, for a 6-month period, and it's 2 6-month increments that we're required to do this report. It's a lengthy report. We didn't print it for you. It's available on the policy board webpage. But if you're really interested in seeing some of the details of what we do, there's a lot of material in here. But I wanted to give a couple of highlights for the policy board meeting today of some of the work that's been completed. Related to the Americans with Disabilities Act, we completed with the town of Glenville an ADA self-analysis and transition plan, which the town did adopt. As you know, we've solicited and developed solicitation material for a unified planning work program. I will talk more about that in our next agenda item. Our staff continues to put a lot of resources into the New York State Association of Metropolitan Planning Organizations. We have 4 folks that either chair or are vice chairs of statewide committees related to that group. So a lot of staff effort goes there. We have initiated technical assistance program projects in one of which is a joint project between Saratoga Springs, the town of Wilton, and Saratoga County, as well as projects in Guilderland, North Greenbush, and Troy. And we did complete a project in the town of Glenville. So we continue to make progress on the technical assistance program projects. We hired quality counts to conduct approximately 60 traffic counts and to collect about 75 centerline miles of local road curve data. We expect the traffic counts to really ramp up next year, given that we're getting closer to the winter and holiday season. It's not a good time to gather that sort of data. We've made progress on our highway condition inventories, completed the work, payment rating work for the city of Albany. We've made significant progress and have pretty much completed as of this moment work in Albany County. We've refined the consultation process with the New York State Interagency Consultation Group for all of our TIP amendments. That's related to air quality conformity requirements. Completed the local bridge preservation study, so that's we'll be tackling additional work on infrastructure in the coming year in our unified planning work program. We've hosted a number of webinars related to our New Visions regional transportation plan, including a 3-part series on complete streets over the summer. We're working with a consultant team to develop a smart communities toolbox. Completed 4 of our traffic safety ambassador program projects. We're working with many folks here at the table on the Patroon Greenway feasibility study. Put a lot of staff effort, obviously, into building the materials for the transportation improvement program and issuing the solicitation. Back in April, we held the Regional Transportation Coordination Committee's Tools of the Trade workshop, which is for our human service transportation topic area. We were working with CDTC on our bus lane feasibility study. And finally, we held a Ditch the Car challenge from basically early June to early October, which is one of our regional travel demand management initiatives. We had 80+ participants in that challenge with 1,600 trips logged, 22,000 miles traveled, and 18,000 pounds of greenhouse gas emissions were prevented through that program in that initiative. So that's a very high level brief summary of some of the work that we completed this year. Did anybody have any questions? Okay, thank you. Move on then to the UPWP solicitation update. I will share my screen with you once again to review the results of the solicitation and the projects that were submitted. So this table reflects a summary, a very brief summary of the 6 proposals we received. We received a request from the town of Brunswick to conduct basically a linkage study on Hoosick Road, or New York State Route 7, between the city of Troy's line and Route 142. Requests from the village of Colony for a Sand Creek Road complete street feasibility study. From the town of Hoosick, we got a different request to conduct, use a consultant to assist them with developing a local road asset management capital improvement plan that would support some of our infrastructure program. The city of Saratoga Springs requested a Church Street Complete Streets corridor study. The city of Schenectady wanted a linkage study in the area of Albany and Crane Streets, which builds upon the Craig Street work that was done in the last couple of years, and looking to identify options to improve the flow of different forms of traffic and transportation, basically in the range of mobility options in the neighborhood for a wide variety of users, and to support the economic success of businesses in the area. And then the final request is from the town of Wilton, which is to update the exit 16 linkage study related to the bridge over the Northway and the lands that surround that bridge. As things have changed up there, and they're looking to further refine some of the options and ideas from that 2012 study. So all of that has led to, in terms of the federal funding requests, $340,000 in funding requests. So our staff will be evaluating these. We'll be considering them as we build the UPWP, which we will be working with the planning committee on in the next 2 months, along with the TIP, bringing the draft to you to approve in March. That is it. Any questions on the UPWP? Okay. Hearing none, we'll move right into the last major item, which is the planning policy board and planning committee schedule for 2022. I apologize, I just closed my browser. So let me bring it back up. Okay, so on screen, you will see the proposed meeting schedule for next year. As I already said earlier, the first planning committee meeting is being pushed out to January 12th, for the second meeting already scheduled for January 19th. We hope to maintain the February 2nd meeting and get back to our normal first Wednesday of the month and go thereafter for the rest of the year. We do have a placeholder in case we need it for another February planning committee meeting in the event things get delayed or things come up. That would likely be the third week of February. And this body, the policy board, is planned to meet again following tradition of the first Thursday at 3 p.m. on March 3rd, June 2nd, September 1st, and December 1st. This will be available on the website for both the planning committee and the policy board. I will also note the dates of our amendments when we asked for your draft amendment letters, and any additional information are all part of this schedule as well. Any questions about that? Okay, so that is all I have there.
Okay,
Move on to status of planning
Yeah.
activities.
did you have anything to add on status planning activities?
The only thing I will add from CDTC's perspective is, with all the staffing changes, I think Glenn Pasca has retired, if you have not heard that already. We are hiring, in the process of hiring 2 people right now, and working on probably a very long list of 10 to 15 consultant-led initiatives. So there's a lot of planning work going on, and that's all we'll say for now.
Great. So let's go to CDRPC.
And Craig Warner's with us online.
Great.
Go ahead, Craig, and you're muted. Craig, you need to unmute, please.
There you go.
All set?
You're all set. Perfect.
Thank you very much. CDRPC has 4 updates. Number 1, there is no new information on the release of the 2020 census data. It's still tentative for sometime in 2022. Number 2, CDRPC has partnered with CEG to conduct a $130,000 supply chain study and an application to the Federal Build Back Better Regional Challenge focusing on the offshore wind industry. Number 3, CDRTC will be awarded $176,000 from the Northern Border Regional Commission to conduct broadband planning to Saratoga, Schenectady, and Rensselaer and Greene counties. Number 4, CDRTC was awarded $1.2 million from the DEC to administer the Climate Leadership Coordinator Program across 28 counties in the state. Is there any questions?
I see none. Thank you, Craig.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Congratulations. It's great. Harm.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. A couple things. We're finishing up a major expansion of our Troy facility that was paid for with our Small Starts BRT grant for the Blue Line River Corridor operation. We are in the middle of a major expansion of our Albany garage. Lots of work going on there. Actually, for me, what's satisfying is we're replacing our 25-year-old bus wash. Not a trivial issue, a couple $1 million project just like that. But that's paid for with our Line Washington Small Starts BRT grant. So those are competitive grants that we've been able to secure over the last 10 years, and hopefully, as Ron explained, more to come on that. Closing up our bike share program for the season, it again phenomenally successful, broke last year's record by a lot. Getting ready to unveil a car share program. We assume the sort of the rights, if you will, the capital car share, which was a small car share program in the city of Albany. Will expand it. The number of vehicles will actually almost triple. The only thing standing in our way right now is their electric vehicles, Chevy Bolts, and they're on recall. The batteries are on recall. So as soon as we get clearance from that, we'll be ready to introduce that program. And then last but probably not least, our ridership is back to about 80% of what it was pre-pandemic. But sort of the profile of the ridership is different, not the individuals, but where the ridership is. It's much more compressed in the urbanized area on the real heavy major routes than it was pre-pandemic. So we have a lot of work to do to recover ridership in the areas sort of just adjacent to those real heavy, the Washington, the west end of Washington, right in the city of Troy and city of Schenectady. Everything else is a little slower to come back.
Any questions? The firm. Okay. Pat?
Not to be outdone by Carm, but at DOT, we are hiring. Please send in your applications. I didn't say that. All positions. But no, we had some good projects since last time we met. We have 2 roundabouts going in on Route 146. One's in Rotterdam, one's in Guilderland. The Carmen Road, Lydia Street, and the Carmen Road are right at the thruway entrance. We're gonna have 2 roundabouts going in. They're designed separately and combined. It's gonna be one construction project. We kind of worked around the thruway schedule of replacing the old State Street Bridge, so all's coming together there. And then another exciting news or sad news, however you look at it, is the erector set bridge on Sidderly Road has a short lifespan. We will be replacing that. The bids went out. The engineer's estimate was very close to the bids coming in, so that will start early in the spring and be opened, I believe, before school starts, right? Isn't that the idea? I think so. So those are 2 good projects going out. One other announcement, speaking of hiring, is our resident engineer in Rensselaer County, Mike Flashman, retired. And Blake Buckner, who's been an assistant out there for over 20 years, he's acting. So if you need to contact anybody in Rensselaer County, Blake Buckner is your man. So that's all I have.
Great. Any questions for DOT?
Just one question, Pat. Actually, a couple people asked me, I said I'm gonna be here fast. Do you know what the plan is for the continuation of the sidewalks, East Greenbush and Skodak, or one or the other? They kind of stopped about 3/4 way through East Greenbush, and a few people that have been driving with me said, do you know what the plan is? I said, I've got this meeting, so I throw it out to DOT or.
I know, I do know East Greenbush has their own project to do some sidewalk work to the towards Albany from where we left off. There's a gap there.
Yeah.
Somewhere between, we say, where we left off, the Stevens later. They have their own project. As far as towards the Skodak, we got found a logical termini of that project, and we don't have any existing plans to continue that. We do have, I guess, a standing offer for the tip update that the local sponsors, if they are interested in building out sidewalk networks on our system, will provide the 15% match with state funds, since state routes are not qualified by Marticelli. Can't use Marticelli funds on a state highway.
Okay.
So we'll provide the state funds from our core state pot to make it a similar project impact for local sponsors.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. We still don't have anybody from the Thruway Authority?
I do not see anyone from the Thruway Authority
All
today.
right, so I do see Steve. I think I saw Steve up there. There you are.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, Mayor Shan. Brief report on the airport. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Thank you so much. Best holiday wishes. Happy Thanksgiving to you and yours and everyone around the committee. So brief report on the airport. Chief Executive Phil Calderon asked me to just highlight the Regional Advisory Committee and technical meetings this Wednesday, December 6th, for our first and 20-year airport master plan taking place at the Millionaire Executive Terminal facilities. Regional advisory members, and these are public meetings, 10 a.m. In that lobby of the Millionaire facility. Free parking is provided, and 1 o'clock for technical advisory committee. And our website for the master plan is ALB-master, MASTER-PLAN.com, and that'll be updated tomorrow with some in-depth materials if anyone's interested in all the new graphics and working papers relating to our first master plan in quite a while. So with that, I would welcome any questions or move to the next member. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
Any questions? All right. I know there's nothing going on down at the port, Patrick, so.
Thanks, Mayor. I'm going through some of my numbers here. So by this time, so we're 10 months into the year, and we've already surpassed all of last year's longshorewomen hours. And last year was a record with more than, I think, the last 10 or 15 years, and the work that's gone across the wharf. So everyone's very happy with that. And by the end of this year, we will have the most vessel calls in at least the last 3 years and maybe 4 years. So the port's having a good year. It's, I said it before, it's not the same with everybody else, but we seem to have gotten through the pandemic rather well. Everybody, stayed employed and kept going. Workforce development is in full swing with the manufacturing plant that we've been planning for the last 1.5 years, 2 years. We had folks from Marmon Welcon representing their company and from South Dakota and from Quebec for a few days this week. They met with the city, county, BOCES, Hudson Valley, getting everybody on the same page. The ports team is working as hard as they can to try to keep jobs mostly in the south end if we can, but certainly in the city and in the county, so that plant can get up and running when it's built in hopefully about 2.5 years. The mayor probably heard this week and a few weeks ago. The number that I was been talking about for the last year is 350 employees. Marmon and Wellcome are now teamed with Smulders, which is a European steel conglomerate that's simply a supplier to now, in addition to the factory building the tower pieces that stack on top of each other, we're going to build what are called transition pieces, which are, if you see on a photo, the yellow or blue or orange colored piece at the bottom that anchors the entire structure. That's some serious steel. That's going to bump us from 350 to hopefully 550 employees and increase the size of the plant by about 15 or 20%. So very good news for all of us. The bad news for us is it doesn't change our schedule, so now we're figuring out how to build something bigger on the exact same schedule. But very exciting for us and hopefully for the whole region. So thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. If I could, I just want to talk about, we had a great visit with Marmon and their VP of HR and marketing, as well as an HR person from their South Dakota facility. And, once they're ready to hire, they are going to be hiring at a very rapid pace. So this is a huge workforce development opportunity. It's also going to be a transportation demand, and understanding from a public transit standpoint and from, the roadways and usages and trucks and supply chain. So having this on our radar early, I think, is an example of how this group works, why we come to these meetings, because, we're able to have these conversations and facilitate that. So thank you to the port for your leadership, and we're very excited about the prospects for this. We had in our package the linkage local planning activities. Did you have anything you wanted to highlight on that, or are we?
We are continuing to work on, as I said earlier, 6 to 7 different linkage projects. We're hoping to wrap up a few in the next month or two. A couple of them are going to roll over into the new fiscal year, beginning April 1st. But that's all I wanted to mention on that today.
Great. Did anyone have any other items, issues they wanted to bring up? I see Phil Barrett has his hand raised.
Go ahead, Phil, you need to unmute yourself.
There we go. Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate it. Just want to quickly introduce a young man with me today, Kartrick. He's a senior at Shen, and we have a partnership with Shen where we have some kids that spend some time with us through an internship program. And he's learning a little bit about CDTC today. So just wanted to introduce him to the group. One other thing, Pat, if I might, obviously Siddeley Road has become a topic of consistent discussion between DOT and the town. I want to thank DOT and Pat for the design that they came up with, which affords a great deal of pedestrian access that we didn't formerly have. So I do want to thank you for that and incorporating that into the project. I just wanted to, you had mentioned that you'd be ready to start early spring, which I know has been your goal for some time. Can I just, I kind of missed what the expected time frame might be from beginning to end of construction, which I know right now can be difficult to estimate. But what is your estimate at this point for that, Pat?
So I'm predicting they're going to be starting out there probably late March, early April. And again, the goal is to have it open to traffic by the time school starts with, some cleanup work after that. But they should be able to get a lot of the substructure built with the existing bridge in place. Does that answer your question?
All right, that's good. Yeah, that's good news. Obviously, it's going to be an inconvenience around our exit 9 area, but that cannot be avoided. And but do appreciate your partnership on that project throughout. That's all I had, Mayor. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Anyone else? So I just wanted to briefly also share, some of you may have been there, the chamber does an annual update, economic outlook with Hugh Johnson. That happened this morning. And again, I think something important to have on all of our radars. First of all, with respect to inflation, he is projecting that it's going to settle out at about 3.5% in 2021, or 2022. So, come down off the numbers that we're seeing. That's his projection. He caveated everything with saying this assumes that the Federal Reserve doesn't screw things up and start to tighten monetary policy too soon. But the big thing that I think all of us should be aware of is that in our 4-county region, he's projecting that in 2022, we are going to add 27,948 jobs. So almost 28,000 jobs. The percentage increase by county ranges from 4.2% in Rensselaer County to 2.8% in Albany County. We're talking 6,600 jobs up in Saratoga County. This is a lot of job growth, and we're already feeling the impacts of being able to find people and to hire people. And so I think, the interesting thing will be of these new jobs, how many of them are remote and how many of them are in person. That's going to have an impact on commuters. But as we think about how we as a regional body can also be working with other regional players on recruitment, it's going to be a big lift and a big a challenge, but it's, as my dad used to say, it's a high-class problem. But it was a very rosy outlook, both for economic growth and for this region, but it also is going to come with some challenges that those of us around the table are in a unique position to be able to address. So that's all that I had. Great.
Can I add something to
Sure.
that? I think for companies that are looking for people, you need to work with your school districts, because there's a lot of kids that are, college is getting too expensive and things like that. If you can get into their mind, hey, you want to work with us or whatever, if you don't need a college degree or you don't need a large one, we bleed kids going to other places. If we can keep those kids here, we've got a whole bunch of extra kids, or a whole bunch of extra people. So
Absolutely. And as Patrick knows, we're working with to get some federal funding for workforce development, and really trying to be proactive in getting from that training to jobs to careers. And if we can accelerate that, to your point, I think we grab those kids before they go off and do something else. So we have upcoming meetings, Bike Ped and Planning Committee. Any other events you want to highlight?
We are focusing on the tips, so I think we're devoting a lot of time to that. But check our website for any additional meetings that are coming up in the coming couple of months.
Can I have a motion to adjourn? Second? All right, we are adjourned. Happy holidays, everyone.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.